So Trevor put out this tweet. I'm going to let Trevor lay the groundwork because Twitter, you only have so many characters. Yeah. So I'm going to let you expand
I've got a lot of groundwork.
I'm going to let you expand on your thought, and then we can present counter arguments if anyone has any.
Go ahead and read the tweet.
Yeah. So Trevor's tweet was, I think this run from Ganon will go down as the greatest MPO season of all time by time we get to October. If he wins Worlds, I'd probably call it right then and there. 7:32 a.m.
Doesn't
August
necessarily
5th.
sound like an anti-Paul McBeth tweet, but that's how everybody took it.
Oh, dang.
So therefore, I need to go ahead and give you. We're going to call this segment an invitation to consider. Obviously, everybody.
This is Trevor's tweet. We had Trevor's trivia.
Everybody in the comment section obviously got very offended. Paul 2015 this, Paul 2015 that. So I'd like to say a few things. Number
one, it was
one,
nice to see the Paul peeps come back out.
They do every time.
The Paul Patrol.
Every time.
The Paul Patrol.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to say a few things. Number one, Paul McBeth, since the time I started watching disc golf, has been probably my favorite disc golfer. There is absolutely no animosity in this take towards Paul McBeth. Number two, I completely understand the eras, the difficulty in arguing between eras, but I'll get to that in a second. But I'd like to just lay out some things. It's just an invitation to consider. So let's look at Paul's 2015 season. Let's look at it. He had 18 wins that year. Now, what's important about those 18 wins is half of them were made up of 8 A tiers and 1 B tier. Now, I understand. This is a very important thing as well. I understand that players could only play what they had to play. So that is, I'm not arguing this from an accomplishment standpoint. It's from a skill level standpoint. How much skill did it take objectively to do these things? So I want to look at those A tiers because that made up a huge chunk of that season that we're claiming is the greatest. He went 3 for 7 in NTs that year, which is great. But these A tiers are a big chunk of that season. So in those 8 wins, those A tiers, I'm going to use player rating because even though we don't love ratings, it is, in my opinion, the most accurate way to assess how good was the field at that time. If you look at the list of top-rated players right now, the current list, there are a few outliers here and there, but I'd say 90 to 95% of the list is accurate. The highest-rated players are a lot of the best players in the world. Mm-hmm. So if you look at those 8 A-tier wins, there was an average of 13,000 rated players and above per tournament. 13. To give you some perspective on that, the weakest field on the Pro Tour this year was the Copenhagen Open, a full Pro Tour. That has strength of 18 compared to Waco, the highest being 72, according to StatMando. At that weakest Pro Tour, remember, 13 average, 1,000 rated, some of them as low as 6, a couple of them, at those Paul wins, 45, 1,000 rated and up at the weakest Pro Tour. At a middle-of-the-road Pro Tour, according to Strength of Field, Texas State's, there was 104 players 1,000 rated and up. Paul's strongest field that year had 55 of these players. So that's about half of the strength of the field of Texas State's. Mm-hmm. He also that year won 3 of his majors in a weakened field. He also had 5 attempts to win majors that year because there were 5 of them. The Aussie Open, there were literally only 5 players that had a chance of winning. The rest of the field were locals and shot 15 strokes behind the other 5. The European Open, to give you an example of how much weaker it was back then, players didn't all travel out to Europe. There was 35 players above 1,000 rated. There was 89 this year. And one of my other big points is Paul and Rick, because I once again I understand the era thing is difficult, and also I'm not punishing Paul for playing in that era and doing what he did. It was incredible, but Paul and Rick still play today. That era was 9 years ago. They're not ancient guys and Rick is playing at arguably a higher level today. So we do get some clues into what disc golf was then and now. And the last thing I kind of have here is Ganon so far this season with far greater competition and way more events that give you chances for bad finishes. Each event is a chance for good and bad. He is averaging a finish place of 4.6. That is ridiculous. If he wins Worlds, I think he has the greatest of all time season based just on just accomplishments based on true skill difficulty, not significance. We're talking about how hard it was to win what he won versus how hard it was to win what Paul won. And if he stays on this pace the rest of the season, I think there just is no other argument. So that is my invitation to consider. This is not meant to be a this or that. That was not really what this take was meant to be. I just kind of threw it out there because I was amazed at how hard it is to do what Ganon is doing. But since everybody wanted to get all boom, 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 I just wanted to throw some facts your way before you start tossing out, well, Paul only finished, like, half of his season took place against just tragically weaker fields.
There's a lot of facts that I think are difficult to argue.
May
with.
I boom, boom, boom?
Yes.
A little bit? Thank you. Okay.
I will allow you to
My only qualm with your take is that you're willing to call it after Worlds
Okay.
when there is a lot of season left. Because Paul, 3 of the majors that he did win still exist today. There was 5 chances at majors. He did win all 5. The A-tier argument, that is a slightly different landscape of disc golf because a lot of the A-tiers were still at least attended by his only competition back then, which is obviously his biggest flaw, but it's also, what was he supposed to do? He had to beat Ricky week in and week out, and he did all but
Well, I would like to
a few
mention
times.
it was not his only competition back then. Most of those A tiers were much weaker fields than there was potential to be.
Yeah, I'm saying back then, though, they're if you look at the 2015, 16, 17, that stretch, there was only like 5 guys.
No,
this is for your argument. There's only 5 guys. So I'm saying his only, it doesn't matter how many 1,000 rated players because like those people back then were never winning.
Right.
Nowadays, sure, that matters a lot more. I'm saying back then, like the A tiers felt like NTs because there was only like 3 guys that could win and they were all there.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That was why A tiers felt way more. Nowadays, players don't go play random A tiers, and if one does, the whole field doesn't follow him. Back then, it felt like the whole field followed him because we had only a few handful of players. My qualm with it is just, let's say Ganon wins Worlds and then rattles off 30th, 60th, 80th, 54th. That's not the greatest season of all time.
So that's why when I said the thing about just accomplishments, not the entire season, not like what I would say is if he wins Worlds and you took all his wins and Worlds and just what he won and you compared it to what Paul won against each other, I think what Ganon did is more difficult. That's what I'm saying.
But I think that the consistency is where you lose it. Because Paul finished.
That's why I said that.
If Ganon stayed averaging 4,
that's why I said
there's no argument.
I think just based on accomplishments, on true skill difficulty, not significance.
But I wouldn't call it the greatest season of all time. Because if he went, in my scenario, if he went 50th, 80th, even if he went 30th to finish, I think that taints it too much.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a much more complicated argument because then it kind of goes to how we argue player of the year sometimes, where it's like, do you look at just what they succeeded in or them as a whole? That's what I'm saying is if I compare wins to wins, if he were to win Worlds, that's where I would take Ganon. But you're right. Yes, if he had an awful end of the season, I wouldn't just say outright. And like I said, I don't even like going down this road.
You tweeted it.
Right, but I didn't say anything about Paul's season.
You said it would be secondary to Ganon's because of the tweet.
According to what? I was saying, everybody else brought Paul's name in there.
Well, yeah, but
I didn't bring Paul's name anywhere into that conversation.
If I say Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time, that is a statement against LeBron James.
No, but Trevor didn't say that Ganon Burr is the best disc golfer of all time.
He said
he was referring to his season.
Yes, but he said the greatest of all time.
And I also said, you have to remember this. I said, I think, and I'd probably. That's the key thing people would just brush over.
Yeah,
I didn't say.
If you're willing to throw Worlds out of it and say he has to hold this pace the rest of the year, I'm on the same page.
I didn't say I guarantee and bar none. I said I think and I'd probably, and everybody hopped in my replies like I had just said. This is what they read. Paul McBeth's 2015 season is nowhere as good as Ganon's is right now. Paul McBeth sucks, and you are guaranteeing it. Like that's what people read in that tweet. That's what bothers me. That's what made me spend 20 minutes.
Literally, my
Googling.
only take against it is just willing to call it after Worlds.
The fact that that's our common ground, I'm delighted.
I don't even think he has to win Worlds. I think if Ganon just holds the 4th place average finish the rest of the season, then there's a very solid argument that it's better than the 2015.
I'm delighted you feel that way, and I think this may be the most shocking common ground we've ever had in our life, and I'm delighted.
Well, because statistically, I mean, I don't think you'd have to be living under a rock to think that what players are going against day in and day out. My only qualm is just I think he just has to hold, which there's no reason to think he's not going to.
Yeah.
He hasn't slipped yet. And with how dominant he's been, he can slip to like 15th a few times and still hold that average finishing place. Realistically, he's probably going to win Worlds. And if he wins Worlds and he just finishes close at USDGC, I mean, that's pretty darn close. And then it's hard to argue against a guy in this field averaging 4th, because the other problem, too, is if Paul hadn't lost, like if Paul had won everything, that's a whole different argument. He did lose. I think he lost 6 times.
3 for 7 in NTs.
And he came in 3rd, and some of his losses were a C tier. I think he lost the Aussie Open warm-up, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he did.
One of his losses is a C tier.
Yeah.
Like, as much as that doesn't play in, it does if you're counting A tiers.
It gives you perspective as to what to, and I hate doing the errors thing, but it's a little different. Like, people were saying, like, sending me video arguments about trying to compare Babe Ruth to Shohei Ohtani. I'm like, Babe Ruth played 100 years before Shohei Ohtani. Paul McBeth is still playing. Ricky is still playing. The guys that cemented that era and their greatness in that era are still playing and are not old men. Like, they are capable of offers.
Paul was playing at a higher level.
Paul was playing at a slightly higher level. Yeah. I would agree. Ricky is playing at least the same level or very close to it. So,
well, like, we are with your argument, he must be playing better considering he's still competitive with a better field.
I think there's a difference when you have a guy, but we're talking about Ganon, who's head and shoulders above the rest, though. Like, I think that that's important to remember. But I think that some people, like, those eras are a lot closer than you think. It's one thing, like, it's the same thing with LeBron and MJ. They'll never play against each other. Their eras are separated by a lot of years. So it's tough to make that argument. But when you look, and, like, you can go back, I challenge you, just go back and watch 2015 USDGC and watch how many mistakes they make and just the way they throw the disc. And just tournaments from back then. Those guys just wouldn't have won a lot of these tournaments because you have guys like Calvin and Ganon who just play like robots.
I do think that 2015 Paul would have several wins this year.
I'm not saying he would. I'm not saying he wouldn't.
Mainly his putter. I don't know if I've ever seen someone putt the way 2015
there are plenty of times that Paul won back then that just wouldn't have happened if the field was as strong as it was. That's the argument.
Yeah, because the flip side that I think is pro McBeth 2015 is by how much he won some of the stuff he won. Where it's like 2015 Worlds.
Yeah, because if one guy didn't play good, he was going to dominate.
But I'm saying 2015 Worlds, like, how much did he actually win that by?
9.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good argument of, like, okay, well, the field's weaker. He just pummeled them into the ground.
Gannon just won this weekend by 7.
He did.
In a much harder field over 4 rounds. I mean, you guys forced me into this. I stand by everything I said. Like, I'm just inviting you to look at hear what I just said about the strength of field and how much different it is. And if you just say it's not invalid, that's just ridiculous because we're not talking about as much within the era thing. I'm talking about skill required. How hard was it? Skill required. How hard was it? And these things happen less than 10 years apart.
Yeah, because I think this part of I think this run from Ganon will go down as the greatest MPO season of all time by the time we get to October. I think if you disagree with that statement, you just don't know disc golf.
Thank you.
The secondary part is where
that's fine.
Secondary part is my only qualm.
We can just delete that part.
That's my only qualm. It's just like, Worlds happens next week. We've got the whole playoffs and another major.
I just
that
know,
he could collapse.
Like, it's so important to have a united front in a marriage, and I feel that right now.
Yeah. No, the first statement, I think.
Do you agree with us, Connor?
If you don't, I agree with you. Okay. If you don't mind, I have 2 follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, Trevor.
Yeah.
Why do you hate Paul McBeth with a bloodthirsty passion?
I was about to ask that. That's a great question.
So, like, who hurt you?
Yeah.
That's my first question.
Paul, clearly.
And, like, to where you're tweeting, like, purposefully to demean him.
You want to know.
And attack him.
And...
So that's interesting to me. That's the only thing I disagree with about your tweet is I wish it was less aggressive towards Paul.
That's true.
So I can't quite get on board.
You should have kept his name out your mouth.
Yeah. My second question is Burr versus McBeth the new McBeth versus Climo? Right now, in this moment, it is. In this moment, with this argument, it feels like it.
In this moment, yeah.
In this moment.
Ganon hasn't even won a World yet. Let's start there.
Yeah. No, well, here's the thing. The funny thing, like, I always forget.
This argument just sounds a lot like
sometimes
take away the names, it feels like we're just having a Climo McBeth conversation.
Sometimes I forget, like, what certain tweets are going to do. And because, like, now, it looks like I was engagement farming. It looks like I was trying to get all the Paul fans right up. I tweeted that at like 6:30 this morning because
7:30.
Was it 7:30?
Yeah.
7:32.
I thought it was still in the gym.
No, it was
I
7:32.
screenshot it. I don't know.
7:32.
7:32 a.m.
Oh, I
August
guess I
5th,
was here.
2024.
And I thought of it this morning.
What was the
And
address?
I literally was just like, I think I saw the stat. You know, he's 3 for 3 in leads here. I was like, dang, like what Ganon's doing this year is so insane. And I just threw it out there. I wasn't trying to make any kind of statement. And then before I know it, I'm drowning in replies.
And Trevor,
just drowning in.
Trevor's too passionate about his takes just to engagement farm.
Yeah. And I called him the Paw Patrol. I did. And I'm proud of that.
I don't think that's demeaning. I think that's hilarious.
It's just like
I think we need
if
to
you
make
tweet anything that they can tie him into.
We've
and
got to.
I didn't know they were still here.
We've got to make
they're
a,
still here.
We
I
got to
thought
make.
they were all died off.
We got to make a Paw Patrol shirt and put frosted tips on one of those dogs.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's a great idea. And big diamond earrings.
There's nothing wrong with being a passionate fan.
No
It
one's gonna
happens-
get that.
It happens in every sport. Like there are people that like they don't care what you say. It has to be spun in the name of like their
Paw
favorite
Patrol.
athlete. But
Trevor, that's so good.
I fell victim to it today.
That might be your best intellectual property is Paw Patrol.
I was pretty proud of that one.
Solid.